Hello and welcome to the Families Embracing Diversity Conference. This session is actually pre-recorded, so it's more of like a watch party that we are doing together. So I am going to be here in the chat in the background, but you will be watching a pre-recorded video of the interview with Nikita and I about navigating interracial marriage and parenting. It is a very powerful conversation that I promise you do not want to miss. We are with my special guest, Nikita Gupta, and I will let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, Vanessa. Thank you so much for having me today. I am impressed that you put this conference together. I feel like it's been such a necessary thing, and I just applaud you for it. My name is Nikita Gupta. I'm the creator of Growing Up Gupta, which is a multicultural lifestyle blog. On the blog, we discuss interracial, intercultural relationships, multicultural parenting, food, culture, and more. The creation of the blog really led me to start writing for other blogs, and I ended up becoming an author as well. And so my husband and I wrote some books on interracial, intercultural relationships. Also ended up writing our first children's book called I Love Masala Me, which is dedicated to children that are South Asian and X. And the reason behind that is there were no children's books dedicated to children that are South Asian and X. I'm African American, he's Indian. So during the pandemic, I said, why not? And I created that along with the multicultural lifestyle store called I Love Masala Me, which is just a family brand, just has some designs and other home goods for families like ours. And I'm also a Yahoo Ally partner. And what that means is just I work actively against anti-racism. And I also am the CFO for Multicultural Kids Blogs and a board member for them. And I created the first African American / American Black History box within kids. I was a co-creator with them subsequent to what happened with George Floyd. We really felt that there should be more material out there to supplement what occurs in the classroom, because African American history is American history, but it's really just set to 1 month, but it should be celebrated each and every month, like American history, quote unquote, is, right? So those are some of the things that I've done that you know, at the end of the day, it's about me.
That's amazing, though. That I love that you've seen needs out in the world and you just go after it and you make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I feel like if you have the opportunity to, why not? So
exactly. And every family story deserves to be told. So
yes,
I love that
absolutely.
you're sharing your family story so that other people can find themselves in stories as well. That's awesome.
Yes, indeed.
So you, as you mentioned, there isn't a lot of representation of families that are Black and Indian in media. And so that caused you to start creating all of your blog and books and all of these things. You and your husband have been together for 14 years, correct?
Yes, 15 years in August,
15.
but 14 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you.
So during that time, how has culture and race influenced your marriage and your relationships with each other, but also with your families?
Wow, that's a great question. It's a big question. I will say that we've been together for 19 years, married for 14 and a half, almost 15 years in August, like I said. And from the inception of our relationship, culture and race have impacted us. And I say that because we had to date in secret. My husband, his parents wanted him to have an arranged marriage. And so we used to not go to Indian restaurants. We would kind of just go to random places at weird hours of the night, because he was just like, the Indian community is so tight knit here. We live living in Michigan. And if anybody saw us, we would get caught. So I was fine with that, but I didn't know how much anti-Blackness is pervasive within the South Asian community. And it wasn't until his parents didn't want to meet me and they disowned him for wanting to marry me that I understood. And, you know, so after that occurred, it was about 9 months that took place. And then my husband's dad called him and said, we'd rather have you in our lives than not. And if you're going to be with Nikita, then that's fine. But those scars have always still been there. You know, I think that they have scars as well, because they had these expectations coming from India that their children would both marry Indian women. And when their son, you know, their youngest son decided he wanted to be with a Black woman, they have been scarred. So I understand that, but race and culture, day in and day out for us. Even with my husband, it's interesting that I feel that he has come to be Black by association in a way. We moved to St. Louis Missouri after our daughter was born. I took on a job in St. Louis with an energy company. And when we were going to move out of the condo that we had rented, a neighbor had called the police on us and said that a Black man was robbing the condo in broad daylight. And I was just like baffled. There was so much fear. I was terrified. I called my mom. I started to record the interaction because I didn't know what was going to happen to my husband. And this is a time that was, a very heightened time for police violence, police brutality that was going on. Mike Brown had just been killed. And so the police officer asked for our lease. He got our lease. He looked at it and he said, okay. And then he helped my husband put the TV in the car. But there have been other instances where my husband has gone to a conference and his work friends, they know me because we've, ventured out together. And one of the guys at a conference that he went to some years ago said to my husband, wow, you did a great job for a light-skinned Black guy. And I was just like, wow, the microaggression, the underlying prejudice and undertone that, is said there. He said he's articulate for a Black guy. And that's something I've heard my entire life, unfortunately. But it's just those things. So what we have done is we've had to learn about each other's cultures, cumulatively. He's had to learn about Black identity, especially as having two children that are mixed race, a son and a daughter. And he has to have understanding. He has an understanding of African American history. He knows that. He has to understand Juneteenth and the Black National Anthem. He had no idea what that was. He's, came to the conclusion that there's Black comedy that exists. He didn't understand that. And just the way that I interact with my family culturally, how it's different than how he interacts with his own family. There's different gestures, different things that he can and cannot do. And I've had to learn the same thing with his parents, talk about Indian food. I've had to learn how to make that by myself. I've had to learn how to tie a sari and drape it the right way and put on a lenga and a savar student. And that's one of the reasons I actually wrote the Non-Indian Person's Guide to Indian Clothing, because I wish I had that resource. At first, when I put on a lenga, I put it on backwards because I didn't know which side was the front or the back, because the clothing is very different from ours, American clothing, Westernized clothing. So in addition to that, just like I said, he has to have learned cultural gestures. I have to have learn the same thing, in addition to the holidays that they celebrate and the festivals that we don't have here in the United States. So slowly but surely, one of them called Diwali, the Festival of Lights, has been trickling into American culture, but there's so many festivals and holidays in India that are celebrated that we don't have here. So we both have had to, grow together and explain each other's cultural dynamics over time. So I would say it impacts our day in and day out, especially having children too. We have to explain different things to them as well. And then with our friendship and the relationships that we have outside of our own family relationships, but with friends, I find that we actively seek out other interracial and intercultural couples to be friends with so that our children have that representation in their lives. One of the things that I think has been a plus for me with Growing Up Gupta is that when I decided to finally launch it, I had been in a Facebook group that was secret for Black and Indian couples. And many of them had been through so many tumultuous things to be together. And it hurt my heart so much. And I was explaining things to my husband. It's like, okay, go ahead, just tell people, share our lives so that we can help other people. It can be a resource. But some of those people in there have become our good friends in real life. So that's one of the positives of creating the blog, is creating a community of other people that have shared stories that are similar to your own.
Yeah. There's so many things in my head right now. This
Oh,
sounds
sure.
like a lot to carry. It sounds like a lot for your family to carry. How do you manage that with your kids? We'll just leave it at that.
Okay, sure. With my kids, it's been, one step at a time. I find that since creating Growing Up Gupta, that so many people have had similar stories to me and my husband. And some couples have been married for 30 plus years, which is amazing to me because you hear about culture clash and it won't last for that reason. But one story that really stuck out to me was this gentleman who is Black and Indian. His dad is Indian and his mom is Black. And his dad took him to meet some Indian uncles one day. And when he was there with his dad, the Indian uncle said to his dad, "Who is this little black boy with you?" And so that has stayed with me after he shared that story. So with me and my husband, we're just very intentional with our children and sharing both of our cultures with them. Like we'll eat Indian food, we'll eat soul food, we'll play R&B, we'll play jazz, we'll play hip hop. We just let
Yeah.
them have exposure to all of it, because I think that that is something that you have to do in order for them to feel well-rounded and in order for them to be confident in who they are.
Yes, I agree. I agree. But at the same time, I feel like when you are navigating, bridging those two cultures, let's say, your kids are constantly, at least my kids are constantly getting the message that they're not enough of either. You're not
Yes,
Indian enough or black enough to fit
yes,
in either one. So
yes.
how does your family navigate that? How do you help your kids navigate that?
Sure. Well, what we have is we have a diverse toolbox. So not only did I create the children's book, I Love Masalami, for my children to have that representation and other children that are South Asian and X, but also the multicultural family store. And then, it is a balancing act. I find when Juneteenth is happening that our children get, they get dressed up for that. We take pictures, we have soul food and things like that. But I think that it's just the intentionality of it that you have to continuously and actively make sure it's happening. Our kids are learning Hindi. They speak some Hindi. And I think that's important, that you have to make sure that they have the mother tongue of their, ancestry and their heritage and things like that, especially because my husband's family is from India. He's the first generation in India. So for his family, I don't think his parents actually intended on staying, but they did. So being able to have them speak the language and understand the cultural dynamics is essential. And that's how we've been able to navigate it. It's totally a balancing act, but it can be done.
Do the grandparents help with that, or is it mainly on you guys to maintain that balance?
It is mainly on us because we don't live in this next to either one of our parents. We live in North Carolina. My parents live in Illinois. His parents live in Michigan, but they
Okay.
do culturally enforce things when they do come.
Yeah.
And my parents have recently branched out more. My mom did originally, but I'm trying to get my dad to come visit more because he's an entrepreneur. He's a pastor. He also he works full time. So being able to just have them come and celebrate the Indian festivals and stuff with us has
Yeah.
been phenomenal. Last year, they came and celebrated Holi with us, and that was the first time they'd ever done that. My mom had previously celebrated Diwali, but being able to, like I said, blend it and then also figure out the festivals and holidays that work for you all. I'm Christian, my husband's family is Hindu, so being able to say, okay, these are the holidays and festivals that we're both comfortable celebrating together and that are most important to us and represent our family. And then being able to celebrate them the way that's comfortable for us. And so that our children understand the concept behind the holiday and the festival and why we celebrate it.
So if I'm understanding you right, when you're celebrating these holidays, they don't have to look exactly like they did back home
Correct.
or okay.
Correct. We've evolved them to fit our family. And I think that that's something a lot of interracial, intercultural, multicultural families have to do.
Oh yeah, definitely. We always get into
Yes.
that every year during my husband is Mexican, so every year during Day of the Dead, I'm like, we need to celebrate Day of the Dead. And he's like, we can't. It's like Thanksgiving here in the US and we need all of these things. And well, we need a version.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
You have to work with what you've got.
Yes.
So what you've given a lot of great advice already, but
Oh,
what
thank you.
advice would you give for other interracial couples and interracial relationships, especially when it comes with the external pressure from families of maybe their expectations not being met or society feeling like your family doesn't fit in the boxes that they love so much?
Yes, I will say that the societal pressure will always be there. People are always going to stare. They're going to question you all. How are you able to get married? My husband and I hear that all the time. Um, and people just wonder why you were able to become a couple, how your interaction works as a family, how you're raising your kids, because I think a lot of times people presume that the kids will have identity issues and won't understand who they are. But I will say that you and your significant other have to be a team. You have to be willing to grow together through the good and the bad. Ask all the questions that you can when it comes to culture and it comes to how you want to raise your kids if you decide to have kids, how your household will look. Will you have an extended family there or not? What happens when your parents get older? Because that's a big thing in Indian families. You know, yeah.
Mexican too.
It is. Um, ask, ask ask anything and everything that you can think of at the end of the day. But I think that the issue becomes for a lot of couples is that nobody thinks about how in 5 or 10 years you're going to change as a person.
Mhm.
And if you're changing, you need to make sure that your significant other is growing alongside of you. And I think that takes a lot of empathy, that takes a lot of forgiveness. And I think that that will help a lot of couples at the end of the day continue, to be able to fight the good fight, if you will, of being in an interracial, intercultural relationship. Something else that I wanted to add on is that you should definitely learn the language and go to the home country if you can of your significant other. For me, I would say learning the language and speaking some Hindi, even if it's just a couple of phrases that you know, that will go a long way. And I'll give you an example of why, because after we had our daughter, I was at a wedding, my first Indian wedding, and some aunties were sitting at a table with my mother-in-law. And one of the aunties goes and says in Hindi, Nikita doesn't speak any Hindi, does she? And I puckered up and I was just like, but I do know Hindi. And I said it back to her in Hindi. And my mother-in-law just had so much pride in her face. And this Indian auntie was so embarrassed. And my husband always talked about that. He was just like, I'm so proud of you. I was like, I am too.
It does.
I was just not fearful of just letting her, say negative stuff about me in front of my face like that. But
Yeah.
learn the language, go to the home country. And one thing that another couple that is Black and Indian, the gentleman is African American, his wife is Indian. They've been together for about 28 years now. They share on our Instagram page every year of our anniversary. He writes to us and says, keep saying I do. And I think that that's something that each and every couple, interracial, otherwise, you need to consider and continuously think about the positives, because I think so much of today's society, everything is so negative. And if you remember the positive things, the positive reason why you got together, why you formed the union you did, why you have the children you do, et cetera, then that will also help your relationship.
I love that. That's beautiful. That is so
Oh,
beautiful.
thanks. Yeah.
So where can people find out? You mentioned already, but just to clarify, where can people find out more about you, about your work, about your story?
Sure. I am available at www.growingupgupta.com, on Instagram at Growing Up Guptas, on Facebook at Growing Up Gupta the blog, on Twitter at Growing Up Guptas, Pinterest at Growing Up Guptas, TikTok at Growing Up Gupta. And feel free to write me at growingupgupta@gmail.com if you have a question or anything. And my books are all available on Amazon.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time and for being a part of
Thank
this.
you so much, Vanessa. I do appreciate it.